It's 53 days to go until the 8th of May elections, and the party lists are in, and now the vetting and verifying of the candidates begins. Some controversial names have made the cut on the ANC's list, and these include Malusi Gigaba, Batabile Dlamini, and Nomvula Mukonyane. The DA is yet to reveal its list. But what do we make of the ANC and the EFF candidates? I'm joined now via Skype to unpack this by Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University's Ongama Mtimka. And Ongama, pleasure to have a chat with you this evening about this topical political issue of the week, the party lists. The ANC has gone the route of making their list public. The EFF have done the same. And the DA have said they will do so on Sunday, but the attention seems to have been focused more on the ANC's list. What is your view of the way these parties have gone about the compilation of the party lists?
First of all, Tim, I'd like to explain why there's such a craze in South Africa about the party list. I think we've seen the worst of a parliamentary system during the past, I think, especially in the last term, the past parliamentary term, where we saw that MPs, when time came for them to take the right decisions, motivated by their love for the country and their commitment to the Constitution and their oaths of office, could prove to be more loyal to the party than they were to their office. So this is contextual. Our interest as South Africans to the party list, because remember we're a closed party list system, where parliamentary democracy, where voting happens, elections are contested by political parties on a closed party list. It's only at local government where we have a mixture, where people who live in a certain constituency know that the person we are voting for to represent us is so and so. With this one, it's a closed party list, but the interest, I argue, is increased more by the fact that we've just seen the worst of our system, and people are wanting to see secondarily whether the ANC is in fact following through on its promise that it is correcting what we saw in the past few years. So the interest in that list, especially the names of some of the people which were found by the courts to have been on the wrong side of due process, and even though they weren't found on criminal charges basis, but on integrity and following due process. So the interest is around that, because for us, it tells a story of whether those that are pro-reform in the ANC are succeeding, or the stalemate continues.
Now, there's a lot being made on the standing of President Cyril Ramaphosa, and that the campaign of the ANC is going to be largely around him, and that there's positive sentiment for him to succeed in the next coming elections. And he was asked this question about party lists in Soweto yesterday, President Ramaphosa, that is, and he says that this is the outcome of the branch process of the ANC, which leads to the question then that why would the branches of the ANC be out of step with what appears to be the popular sentiment in the nation about some of the individuals on the ANC list?
So there's something, Tim, that people forget, that outcomes of branch nomination processes in the ANC, in my view, are largely manufactured. It's manufactured consent. The reason I say so is that the structure of campaign craft and how one gets into office in the ANC is usually top-down, even though the false impression is created that the power is in the branches. The reason this is so, there's always a saying in the ANC that whoever belongs to the camp or faction of the secretary is most likely going to win in an election, precisely because those processes are managed And usually the people who campaign for office in the ANC know from a warm body to warm body perspective who is likely to vote in a certain way. And what happens is that people are always sidelined in processes and sometimes credentials. That's why in an ANC conference or BGM, there will be debates, long debates about credentials before one gets to, get to the voting, because they know that people who belong and are going to vote for so-and-so are in one camp, others are in another. So the ANC really is not a true democracy. It's processes. They are in serious need of reform. They allow for the crooked and for those that can master, that can manipulate, that can run campaigns successfully and are well-resourced to always win ANC election processes. It's never, in my view, about who's best for the job. And as such, I wrote this in an article early this week in the Mail and Guardian that says, it's time that ANC people recognize that, in fact, realize that party office and public office were not centers of power, but centers of service, which should be regarded as an honor. And I argue in that article that to want to deploy or take the leadership structure of a party, of the ANC, and impose it in government positions willy-nilly, when the process of becoming a leader in the ANC is as flawed as manipulating and marshalling resources and sidelining people, it is not good for the country.
But then, tell me, I mean, individuals do have the moral independence to be persuaded to step aside once they realize that insisting on being on the party list may not serve the interests of the organization. In this instance, we're talking about the ANC, right? Why would the individuals whose reputations have been tarnished insist on being kept on those lists? And we learned that even former President Jacob Zuma was on the list, but he asked not to be put on the list. So what makes it difficult for those individuals to do so, to step aside for the benefit of their organization? Because the public are clear about this, at least, you know, the opinion that is being expressed widely in this nation, that certain individuals shouldn't be on that list.
Yeah, I think the ANC, so while I have criticized its party processes and structures, it must be commended about how it has managed this process. Remember, usually it's the list conferences, and the most power resides with this process, which I have said is very flawed, with this mass-based process. But this time, in their guidelines, they said only 25% of the names that came from the wider public participation process were going to be on what they called a safe zone. But the rest, about the 75%, was the leadership of the ANC looking at those numbers, balancing racial representation, balancing gender representation, and also looking into this question of integrity. So what we see as the ultimate shows that the process at least was useful enough. But now to answer your question more directly, the challenge is that the leadership of the ANC that is there now is a stalemate leadership. And they are divided, even though they put up a united front. And part of the divisions, I mean, what we saw, for example, as allegedly coming out of the Maharani Hotel meeting, was a fight-back campaign whose objective, among others, was to swell the party, was to increase the numbers in the party list of those that were pro-Jacob Zuma. So the shortest answer to your question is that this may perhaps be part of the fight-back plan. And it may be very interesting in the sense that it will, for the first time, give us a parliament where there will be, if there were fewer numbers that could vote with the opposition during the Zuma era, now those numbers are going to be even higher, because the ANC is split right in the middle. And there will be times where the failing of consensus within the party will make Parliament will make almost half of Parliament be open to being lobbied by the opposition on certain motions, should those factional battles continue even in this term.
Ongama, let's pause for a moment and take this call from Gabriel, who is joining us from Soweto. Gabriel.
Yes, no, how are you?
Good, welcome.
No, I'm fine. I think the movement, in the general sense, they're never able to go through. There's a document called the document in the African National Congress, the conduct of the new cadre. The conduct of the new cadre is say we need people that have integrity, have a good image, that are honest, that are loyal. Now, the movement, you cannot put people that have been surrounded by the seriousness of the allegations of the corruption, and also they put them in the list. And secondly, people that are in the public domain, they're not appealing to the ordinary citizens. Because here, we're not talking about the ANC government. We're talking about people's government. Because the African National Congress, from inception, we said we need to build the people's government. Not the African National, the ANC government, the people's government. It means as a movement, we must serve the interests of the people. We must serve the basic needs of our people, more than to satisfy the egos. The third point, Tim Modise.
Yeah.
I got a very serious problem that the movement able to idolize untouchable people. You see, when you can't have a powerful individual that they can able to drive the African National Congress where it's supposed to go. Like I can give you an example. What happened about the former provincial chairperson of the African National Congress in Northwest. The ANC, from its own tradition, is able to take very decisive decisions. If we had been former PC member, we are the provincial chairperson or the former or a NIS member, you can't take the African National Congress to court, etc. and so on, because it means we are sending the wrong signal.
Gabriel, the points are well articulated, and thank you very much. And Ongama, I would like us to move a little bit and take a look at the lists of the other parties, the EFF and the DA, and how they went about compiling their lists. So you tell me what you see there from a point of view of demographics, and obviously some of the people would not be known to the broader public, so people would not be in a good place to comment on them. But just differentiate the nomination processes of these parties.
So I've not been able to look into detail on the list of the Democratic Alliance and the EFF, but I can comment on the process. Especially for the DA process, what one has seen is that there's been a very deliberate attempt to try and control that process at the senior levels of the party. So what you see, for example, the DA conducts interviews and scrutinizes people's CVs. So their process doesn't pretend to be democratic. Doesn't pretend to be mass-based. And I think as a smaller party, the Democratic Alliance has got more prerogative to be able to do this. But as it grows more and more, it's going to have a challenge when it has what seems to be only a top-down approach when it comes to leadership deployment. But the good thing about it is that it then leaves the party with some leeway to be able to actually part with the political party. And the challenge is, the good thing is that also, so there's always a tension, and also what the previous caller said, there's always a tension between what are the aspirational values of a party and what it says it seeks to achieve. And the political dynamics that compel certain kinds of decisions to be made and others not to be made. So for the Democratic Alliance, that has been to a lesser extent, whereas for the ANC, what we call political accommodation in terms of decision making, it always has that tension with what may be seen to be just and what is required by a wider public rather than the voting bloc of a political party.
Well, I want to ask you a question about whether South Africa is ready to review the electoral process. And please think about that in a moment, because given the interest in the names on the party lists, I think the time may have come for a constituency-based system to be introduced, but you'll respond to that in a moment. Let's hear what Mary from KwaZulu-Natal has to say. Mary, welcome.
Thank you, Tim. I am traditionally a DA voter. I've always voted for the DA, but once Cyril Ramaphosa came to power, I honestly reevaluated my voting power and thought that I would vote for the ANC. But having looked at that list, I cannot vote for the ANC with Batabile, Dlamini, Mkhonyani, Malusi Gagaba. I just cannot morally vote for a party that supports the people that have been proved to be so corrupt. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Mary, from KwaZulu-Natal. And Ongama, your comment on whether the people are ready to vote directly for their elected representatives. What do you think?
The experience of state capture and a parliament that consistently failed to take action against a president who came from the majority party. It was a learning curve for the party. And I think we saw in 2016 when the voters punished the ANC in the major cities that they were saying time has come to draw links between what we call regime performance and what votes a political party is able to get. The shortest answer is that yes, South Africans seem to be more ready than policymakers have accommodated so far for an open party list system and a constituency-based system. And in fact, Pratim, if you look at voter behavior at ward level, you will see that South Africans have always placed some degree of value on personalities and leadership qualities. So it was not uncommon, for example, a ward councillor who got fired by one political party, who campaigned independently in a ward to win that ward as an independent. And that shows that when it matters the most, South Africans will choose an individual that has got a proven track record than a political party. And I think the ANC, for example, when it started losing votes in 2009, bar the splinter of COPE, the approval rating of Jacob Zuma was, I think, below 50. And at the time that the ANC got kicked out of municipalities, the approval rating of, again, President Zuma was sitting in the 20s. So that shows that our system is actually become more open to credibility of individuals, and to the extent that it actually affects voter behavior.
Well, very interesting, and thanks again, Ongama Mtimka, for having been with us on this segment when we discussed the party list. Thank you. Up next, should we have a TRC for corruption instead of all the costly commissions of inquiry? Businessman Peter Vundla says, yes, of course, and he'll be explaining why.